Welcome to the Double Vision podcast. We are identical twin sisters who grew up with a rare retinal condition, which basically means we've had to do a lot of adapting. My name is Jenelle, and I'm the oldest by 4 whole minutes, so naturally I get to go first. And I'm Joy. A lot of our life has been problem solving, a lot of feelings, and realizing that we're probably not the only ones navigating this. I work as a therapist, and I tend to slow things down and look for what's steady underneath it all. And I'm a writer and creative. I have a background in education, and I navigate the emotional journey in real time. She does, and we balance each other out. Jenelle keeps one foot on the ground, and Joy keeps things honest and alive. On Double Vision Podcast, we talk about the social and emotional experience of being in a body. The stuff we all deal with: identity, belonging, and self-trust. We talk about anxiety and overthinking and what it looks like to advocate for yourself and keep going, even when it's hard. We make space for the parts that don't show up on paper, but shape our whole lives. If you've ever felt like you're trying to figure out how to be yourself out loud, you're in the right place. In our last 2 episodes, Jenelle and I have been talking about identity, and the reason that we've stayed with it for a few weeks now is simple. Identity is complex. It's not just about how we describe ourselves. It shapes how we lead, how we connect, how we handle change, and what we believe we're capable of when life asks more of us than we ever expected. That's why we're so excited to continue that conversation today with a new guest, Sylvia Stinson Perez. Sylvia has lived with a degenerative eye condition since birth, and for nearly 3 decades, she's been a leader and advocate in the blindness field. She's held executive leadership roles across the field, including 10 years as the CEO of the Lighthouse for the Visually Impaired and Blind in Florida, along with leadership work at Mississippi State University's National Research and Training Center on Blindness and Low Vision and the American Foundation for the Blind. In August of 2025, Sylvia released her first book, Treading the Waters of Life, a guide to self-reflection and action, a practical guide for building courage, clarity, and confidence, and she made it widely accessible because her goal has always been impact. Sylvia often draws strength from a Helen Keller quote that fits this conversation perfectly. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. In this 3rd and final part of our identity series, we dive into the leadership side of identity, including imposter syndrome, advocacy fatigue, burnout, and a debate about the word inspiration. All right, let's jump back in. Welcome, Sylvia. This is Jenelle and Joy. We're so glad to have you here on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here and to meet you too.
We invited you to be part of this series that we're doing on identity because of your vast experience in leadership. And so we'll be exploring leadership kind of through that lens of identity. So we'd love for you to start by just telling our listeners a bit about your background and experience as a leader and perhaps some of your challenges.
Well, I think that my leadership journey started off when I was a child because I'm the oldest of 5 who are right in a row. And they have always said that I'm fairly bossy, and now they're saying I'm not as bossy, but I am still the one that kind of arranges all of the family activities. And so, yeah, I'm probably still bossy. And I don't know that I set off to be a leader. I do know that I was very determined. I was very goal-oriented, which I wasn't as a young person, but I had an experience in which kind of a teacher said to me she didn't think I had the ability to achieve or go to college. And so I think that just set me up like, oh, I will show you, and I'll show myself, and I'll show the world. And so I became incredibly goal-oriented. But one thing that was always in my heart was to make an impact on people's lives, to make others' lives better. I think I did not want people to experience some of the hard things that I had gone through. So primarily, I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the lives of people who were blind. I didn't even know about the whole blindness world. I sort of accidentally found the world of vision rehabilitation through just getting a little bit of training, and they offered me a job. They saw my capabilities and my willingness just to say yes, to always be willing to learn, to pitch in, to grow, I think is really how I rose to leadership roles, because I just always wanted to do more, to do better. And that meant I ended up stepping into some leadership positions. I moved from one position to another just by showing the interest, the determination, the willingness to learn. When I didn't know something, I would always go and either get another degree or study or read or find mentors who had that knowledge. I definitely have had challenges along that leadership journey. I've made mistakes. I've watched other leaders, good and bad. It's funny because you learn more from the bad than you maybe learn from the good, right?
Yes.
I remember a few I've said, please let me never do that. Let me never be that.
What are some of the things? I'm curious. This is Joy. What are some of the things that you're like, never do that?
Well, leadership power goes to the head or the heart. And so if it goes to your head, then you have this, feeling of, superiority, and you're just maybe not as nice as you should be. Or it goes to your heart and you understand, like, you're humble enough to realize that everyone's just walking this journey and everybody's trying to do their best, and they need guidance and they need your support and your encouragement. So I've had a few where either it went to their head or their heart. But I've also had leaders who I saw who acted without integrity and just destroyed the organizations that, or people that they were supposed to be privileged to lead. Mm. So one of the things I would also say about leadership is that it's really important to always be the person who's most optimistic, the problem solver. One of the greatest compliments that I ever got was when an employee said to me, and she said this in a really the organization was going through a difficult time. She says, no matter what we're going through, you're always the most optimistic person. And that helps us all to be hopeful. Mm-hmm. And I took that charge as, yes, I have to be that, because you're the one who kind of sets the tone for whatever you're leading. If it's in your position, your paid position, your volunteer position, your family, whatever it is that as the person who's kind of that designated leader, even if it's not, an official role, you are setting that tone for people.
It's such a good point. Sylvia, this is Jenelle, and I'm really curious about the intersection between being a woman with a disability and being a leader. Have you experienced any doubts along the way of your abilities because of your blindness? I even back to what you were saying about your teacher questioning your ability. Did you get the sense that that was related to your disability or something else?
Well, that was related to my disability. But I'll tell you an interesting story about that. So I remember I stepped into a CEO role, and it was my first CEO role. So I was nervous. This is one of those where, like, I got the job and I went, really? Oh, wow.
Here we go.
I have a lot to learn. Okay, but I'll do it. And I remember, there was a lot of turnover in the first year, not so much because of me. It was really that the organization had a lot of problems and they needed to make a lot of changes. And I had this employee who started working for me. He actually started as a contractor, and then I hired him. This was a gentleman who was older than me, who had lots of experience, who was very well connected and well respected within the community. And I just remember thinking, I really need this person on our team, but I'm scared because is he going to respect me as his leader? Is this going to work? Is he going to become the boss and not me? And you know what? Today, that was like in 2010, and I haven't worked for that organization in almost 8 years, and he still calls me boss. And when he calls me boss, it's a very much a term of endearment. He respected me. He said, I was the best boss he ever had. You know what? It just showed to me that when you're willing to work with people and you're comfortable with yourself and you're comfortable with your strengths, but you're also comfortable saying, hey, there's something I don't know. I have a weakness in this area. And you build that team that where you're just a part of that team. And you have your things that you do well and they have their things and you all respect that. I think it really helps. Now, I'm not saying that that there is not some challenges around being a woman in leadership, or especially being a person with disability in leadership. There certainly are. But I've also really come to really believe that the more comfortable and confident we are in ourselves, the more comfortable and confident others are with us.
I love that, Sylvia. This is Joy. I'm wondering how you've handled it, if you've ever had someone above you who you feel like maybe doesn't respect you and maybe it's vision related. How do you handle that, or how have you handled that?
Well, interestingly, my very first professional position, my supervisor, although she had worked in the blindness world for many years, did not believe that people who were blind were able. She didn't say it, but she showed it every single day. And I eventually made the decision to leave that position because it caused me too much anxiety, too much stress. And interestingly, I went away for 4 or 5 years, and she went away eventually because she retired. But I happened to pass by the organization one day, and literally they offered me a job on the spot.
Oh, wow. And did you go back?
I did.
Okay, that's great. That's so interesting that you mentioned that she had been in the blindness world for so long, because I found in education that some of the people who have the lowest expectations for me worked in special education. It's so interesting because I'm like, did they go into special education because they wanted to be above someone and not, it's flabbergasting to me.
It happens in the blindness rehab world. Yes, it is just, it's discouraging sometimes because you're like, how can you not get that we're equal? How can you not get that? Yeah, it can be very frustrating. So I think sometimes you have to close a door when those things happen. Sometimes it's making sure that you have the competence to prove that you have those skills, you know? And sometimes you just have to know that there are people you are not going to be able to change their mind. You just keep doing your best until another opportunity comes along.
That's great advice. Thank you. And I know that part of your optimism and your drive to move forward comes a lot from your father. And you have this incredible story in your intro of your book, Treading the Waters of Life, A Guide to Self-Reflection and Action, where you really describe basically this harrowing experience that I would love for you to share for our listeners that your dad went through before you were even born, I believe, and then kind of how that impacted you.
Well, so I opened the book with a story about my dad that is true, and it's back to his time in service when he was working aboard a naval aircraft carrier, and he was pushed off the deck by the wing of a plane. And he was in the ocean for several hours, 9 hours, I believe it is. He knew that it's not their protocol to come back for him. You know, by the time they realized he was there, they're gone. And so he had to do whatever he could do to be resourceful. He took his pants off and made them into a life jacket, and he just kept blowing air into them. And he was watching out for, you know, sharks and whatever comes along in that ocean. But he didn't lose hope, and he had a plan, and he was rescued by a helicopter that happened to see him at night. So it was just miraculous. And it's interesting, he did not really talk about this as we were growing up because it was a hard time for him. When my parents were both terminally ill in 2018, and I went to him one day and I said, Dad, tell me this story. And he told me the story, and I wrote it actually as a speech for Toastmasters. then when I was, going through a tough time in 2023 and then in 2024, I started writing a lot. And I had written blog posts and I had written some, but I really started writing just as a catharsis for myself. And I said, I'm going to turn this into a book. I mean, people kept saying, when are you going to write a book? And all of a sudden I said, here's my opportunity. And this story rose to the forefront for me as the lead for my book. And then it just became the title. And it really drove everything about the book. But my parents were the most resilient people I knew. And they taught all of their children, all 5 of us, to be these resilient people, to be hopeful, to be resourceful. And we just had to learn that. And, as a child who was blind, they never treated me that way. Now, I'm not saying they never did, but I was expected to do all the same chores. I think I got out of mowing the yard, I didn't get out of much. But, I had to wash dishes and make my bed and go to school and, all the things. But I was also allowed to ride the bike on the street. Not that people should do that. It was a dirt road. But so, they believed in me, and that really helped. And so I really did learn to tread the waters of life. Now I'm saying we're all continuing to do that, but, it really did empower me. And I hope the book empowers others as they read it.
Sylvia, are you the only one in your family who's blind, or are there other people?
Actually, I have one of my sisters. The 4th child is also. She has quite a bit more residual vision than I do. But yeah, she has the same. We both have RP. So
just like us.
Yeah.
Progressive vision loss. We won the genetic lottery. I love that story, going back to the story of your father and how inspirational it is, which actually makes me think of how your book really challenges, I think, my view of inspiration, because I have kind of fought against being described as, oh, you're so amazing or you're inspirational, because I'm just going about my life, living my life, and haven't wanted to be seen as an inspiration. And yet your book kind of challenged that perspective. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about why that word has been important to you and what that means to you.
I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but then I want to know from both of you if you've changed your mind at all from this. So
good question.
And it's okay if you haven't. It's okay if you haven't. The whole thing around people being inspired by others is we're inspired by people who do things that we don't know how they do. That we're like, that is amazing that you can do that. I mean, you think about athletes, right? I have always, it really came to me one day when I realized I had these friends, one person who was in a wheelchair, one person who was completely deaf. And I was like thinking to myself, that would be so hard. And it's funny because a few days ago, I happened to break a bone in my foot. And so now I am fairly immobile. And now I'm like, I am even more inspired by people who cannot just get up and walk quickly. But we're inspired by people who do things that we don't immediately think, how could I do that? And that's what happens, is that people are inspired, amazed by us who are blind, because they cannot imagine how they would do it. Don't we want to make an impact? I always think I want people to be inspired, because when you inspire someone, no matter what you're inspiring someone to do, that's a good thing. You're inspiring them to think broader. You're inspiring them to do better. You're inspiring them to do more. So when I think about it, I think I want to inspire people to understand blindness. And if they're inspired by me, then yeah, they're including me. too. I might be on a little bit of a platform, but when they at least make that connection with me, then I have that opportunity to connect with them and eventually be at their level for them. Does that make sense?
This is Joy. I think that connection part does for me. The challenging part for me is that inspiration tends to ride the same wave as pity in some cases, and that's like disconnection, right? When somebody just pities and they're assuming that they're kind of separate from you. I could never do that, like that kind of thing. But I guess when you really look at the word inspiration, and I think you're probably like the third person who's kind of challenged me on this, honestly. And I think it's really started to shift in my brain because I remember several years ago, I have these two friends that both are kind of, I guess, influencer types. One of them makes videos and like on how she even like vacuums and she's completely blind and like no light perception or anything. And so I know that she has received a lot of criticism for like, why would you just post videos of you vacuuming? Like that is so demeaning. That's like contributing to like, the term inspiration porn that people put out there. But then the other friend who kind of came to her defense, who's actually a therapist and I consider her very wise. She had said, well, she's like, let's think about this logically. Like if somebody and she was visually impaired like me, so some residual vision. And she's like, for me to imagine, even everything it takes for her to plug that vacuum in, make sure she doesn't trip over it, have the light line, like all her whole setup to do this really well when you're completely blind. She's like, to me, that is like, she could have just asked her husband or hired a cleaning person. Like to me, that is inspirational. And I was like, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And then same with another friend who's sighted, who had said to me when I was kind of saying how I typically don't like the word, inspiration or people saying you're so amazing. She's like, okay. She's like, but I want to push back and say that even if somebody learns like a new way to crochet in a really cool way or make she's like, that's inspirational for me. So she's like, so when I'm saying that I think you're inspirational for showing up in life the way that you do, she's like, you have a choice and you could have chosen to stay home and to stay scared. She's like, but to me, that's courageous living and that's inspiring to me. And so I don't know what you think, Jenelle, but that's definitely, those are the people who have challenged me. And then the third time when I read it in your book, I was like, okay, this obviously keeps coming up for me for a reason that I need to shift my perspective a bit.
Oh, Joy, I love the way you said that. That was so brilliantly said. Like, yeah.
It really was.
And that's what I'm talking about is that, I have so many people who are blind who say I inspire them. And that means I'm pushing them to want to do more, to do kind of similar things that I think I do. There are some things I do that are pretty courageous. I just went to Honduras on a trip to work with people who are blind by myself. That's courageous. People should be inspired by that. I'm inspired by that because inside I'm scared to death. So, and my neighbor across the road, we have the same neighbors now we moved here about 4.5 years ago. He used to come out and say, oh, wow, you're amazing. And now he's just like, oh, hey, but we were able to make a connection on that. And he doesn't think anymore. Well, he probably still does think it's amazing, but it's okay that he thinks it's amazing because he also thinks I'm just Sylvia. And so it's about making that connection with that person after that. And yeah, there will be those people who pity you. I think way more people are truly inspired in a positive way than are inspired in a pity way, especially if you can help them make that connection that you're just a normal person trying, like you said, Joy, just trying to live your life and not backing down from it. That's not exactly what you said, but that is essentially what you said.
Yeah. I summed it up well. Yeah. This is Jenelle. That is helping me to shape and shift my perspective on that. I think the connection piece is a really good one. I appreciate that you brought up pity too, Joy, because I'm thinking of when I work with clients as a psychotherapist, I work with people who have lost children, and people meaning well will say things like, oh, I could never do that. And that is very disconnecting statement. That's like, oh, you over there, go deal with your life, versus someone who's like, wow, this is a really hard thing and I want to be here in it with you. And so I think it's really the connection piece that has me leaning away from the word inspiration, but the way both of you have reframed it is really helpful. So thank you. And I want to shift a little bit. This is Joy to talking about something that I think a lot of leaders and just human beings, especially in this fast-paced culture, deal with, and that is burnout, especially for people who have that added layer of disability. I mean, I don't know if that's why 85% of the blind population, sadly, is underemployed right now. I think that there is this added layer for someone with a disability of what they have to do to get through a normal workday. And I am curious, Sylvia, how do you balance the drive to move forward and make things better without burning out? Just a brief story. I have this educational data platform that I use at our school, and it's not accessible. And I've met with the company. They had 10 people last week that met with me to kind of go over all of the accessibility challenges, and two of the people on their team were from their accessibility team were blind, and they approached it with such empathy, and it was so awesome, and I was so excited by it. But basically, the bottom line at the end was, oh, it's not really in our budget, like we're going to work on it, but basically when the coders have time in their free time, like they'll work on it if they have extra time. But thank you so much for all of your feedback, and we'll prioritize the things that you want us to change first. But this program's not one I can currently even use, like the buttons when I click on them with VoiceOver just say button, 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 so it's so frustrating, and it's something that would make my job and life so much easier, and I'd be more effective, I believe, in our department if I had daily access to this. And so I have been battling just this balance of, I feel kind of beaten down sometimes of like, gosh, that was a 3-hour meeting that I had that nobody else had to have on top of my regular work to kind of show all the things that aren't accessible, but then it didn't really result in any change. And like, was that a waste of time? I mean, I don't believe it is, because I feel like I'm proud of myself for speaking up, but I'm also sometimes so tired, and I'm just like, how do I balance moving forward without burning out?
Well, first I'll say I'm sorry you're going through that. And unfortunately, it's fairly common, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I was a young professional, someone said to me, and actually, interestingly, I remember it was a sighted person, but they said, it takes so much more energy to do everything when you cannot see, or probably just when you have a disability or a long-term chronic health condition. It just takes so much more energy. And it takes mental energy, physical energy, and you have to think through so many things, and there are so many things that you can't access. And I will tell you, honestly, I've gotten that balance wrong a lot. A lot. Let's just say there's not been a lot of balance. But over the past couple years, probably with aging and some good mentoring and friends who've kind of talk to me, I really have come to understand that, yes, it takes more energy. Therefore, I have to have some activities that regenerate, rejuvenize, relax me. But accepting that everything is just going to take more energy. And so finding the ways to give myself care. And I really was not about that until the past 3 years, but finding a way to really allow myself those things where I really provide self-care to myself. But I will also say that I have really come to value interdependence, and we all want to be independent. I'm going to guess the two of you have been like me, fiercely independent. And so now I've really come to embrace interdependence, because Helen Keller has that wonderful quote, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And it's funny because I think about all the things, for example, that my husband, who can see just fine, can't do, that I can do. So now when I need to ask him to do something for me, I'm like, yeah, you just do that, because that's going to take me 3 times longer. And because he's going to ask me to do things for him because he don't know how. So I've really embraced that interdependence and that self-care. But then, in the professional side, or on the side where you need to be an advocate, We do have to always be advocating for ourselves too. Besides others, we're advocating for ourselves constantly. I think showing up with confidence, with competence, so and courage. It sounds like that's exactly what you did, is that you showed up with courage and said, hey, here's what's wrong, here's what you can do to fix it, with that competence, like you knew what to tell them. So I think showing up with that confidence, competence, and courage, but also making sure you take good care of yourself, because it takes more.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And I try to do my yoga and all the practices, and sometimes it feels like, okay, it's keeping me going. And it is, I think, but there's those times where you're just like, oh my gosh, can I, can I keep doing this? And you can see why, so many people tend to have that sense of discouragement after a long time in certain systems. And at the same time, I so agree with what you're saying about interdependence, and the more that we can shift that culturally too. That's what, we talked about in our very first episode of this podcast. It was on interdependence. And I think that it is slowly shifting, but it's taking some time. So, yeah, this is Jenelle. I appreciate that you just named that things are slower when you're dealing with a disability or chronic illness. And oftentimes people don't realize that. So just acknowledging that and naming that, I think, is really empowering. And along those lines, there's something else you named in your book that I really appreciated. You had a whole chapter on imposter syndrome, and that stood out to me because when I was starting graduate school at the University of Washington, there was a lot of prerequisite videos and little courses you had to take even before starting your graduate studies. And one of them was on imposter syndrome, because it is something that graduate students struggle with so much. And I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about the ways that you have faced imposter syndrome.
Well, I'm going to say not just graduate students deal with it. I think we all deal with it. Even I'm aware of it, and I still deal with it. I mean, we want this image out in the world. I think especially as people with disabilities, we sometimes think, am I smart enough? Am I, do I look right? Do I make the right connections? Am I connecting with people? Are people interested in me? Are people pitying me? Or, we don't know. We're missing some of those cues sometimes. And so we just don't know. And so I think sometimes I'm just out here just trying to put on this brave face of confidence and hoping for the best. So I think sometimes that is what it is. So I will say that confidence, that courage really do help. I'm going to share this really quick quote because I loved this quote that I found when I was writing the book from Nora Ephron. It says, above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim. And this kind of goes back to our thing about inspiration too. I think it goes to this imposter syndrome. So instead of thinking of ourselves as this certain image, like I'm trying to now think of myself more, since I read this quote, as the heroine of my life, like that hero in my life, and showing up as the authentic me, which is really sometimes hard because we want everybody to like us. And so showing up as that authentic person, being proud of who you are, recognizing your strengths, but also recognizing, hey, I might not be perfect. I'm probably not. I have some limitations, but that in many ways is heroic. Saying, I don't know everything, saying, hey, here are the things that I'm good at. Believing in yourself, being comfortable with yourself, going back to that, if I'm comfortable with me, I make people around me comfortable. So I don't know how that lands with you.
It does. I mean, this is Jenelle, and as you know, I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm thinking of the work I do with clients and how many, both sighted and blind, struggle with the limiting belief of I'm not enough. And when you were describing that, I heard so much of that, like not pretty enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, like all the things that we tell ourselves or maybe society tells us. And I appreciate how you shared that quote and are just grounding this in this sense of like looking inward, of like realizing the value that you bring and sharing that with the world, not as a way to be perfect, but as a way to just be truly who you are.
I remember years ago that I was in a group and the person in charge brought out a puzzle and they handed out all these puzzle pieces. So everybody got a piece of the puzzle. The person said that if each person created that beautiful picture, and if there was a piece missing, then you couldn't have a full picture. And I think if we can all recognize the value we bring to the world, that is our part of the world, you know, and we can recognize the value we bring to the people around us, the world would be a better place and we'd be happier. I recently saw another quote that I loved, and I'm going to have to paraphrase it, but it was something to the extent of, success is not what we do or achieve, it's the experience that people around us have because of us. I liked that because it meant that if I'm being who I'm supposed to be, being myself, that people around me are going to be impacted in a positive way.
Can you repeat that quote? I think that's so good.
It's something like, success is not what we do or what we achieve, but it's the experience people around us have because of what we do.
Yeah, that goes along with a leadership quote I heard once, that basically the definition is influence. And we think of it as this big thing, but it's really influence. And that goes along with that. Yeah, the experiences that people are having around us. Yeah,
and if we're not ourselves, if we're not being ourselves, then they're not going to have that good experience if we're fake.
Yeah. Or if we're trying to hide something. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, now that this book is out and that you're working on some projects, it sounds like just got back from Honduras. I would love to close out by you sharing with our listeners what you're doing currently, how Honduras was, and then anything else that you'd like to share.
Well, thank you so much. And I've enjoyed our conversation. So the book is available at no cost. And people have asked me, why did you make this, free? It is 99 cents on Kindle, because you can't have a free book on Kindle, I've discovered. I made it free because it's kind of my legacy gift. I really did not want anybody who needed it to not be able to access it. And so it's available for free on my website, totalimpactpartners.com. And there's now an accompanying workbook because, like you said, there's a self-reflection and action section. So as I was working through, I realized, oh, well, I should give homework. I like to give homework. And then one of the most beautiful moments of it is one of my sisters was one of my editors, and she read through and she called me and she said, I've laughed and cried my way through the book. She said, and now I have to go back and do all the exercises because I really now know I need to do that. And so, and so many people have reached out to me to say that kind of thing. And that's why I wrote the book.
I'm curious, was this a sister who is also blind or
no?
Sighted? No. Okay. So this is work anybody could do, like sighted or blind.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I have received more comments like that from people who are sighted, who have no disabilities. The book is really for anyone, but I mean, of course, at the heart of my hope is that many people who are blind, who have disabilities, have chronic health conditions, who just have life challenges, well, that just about sums up the world, right? Will be able to benefit from it. So I did create a workbook that is a printable Word document, or, a downloadable Word document that literally people can just work their way through. And it has the good quotes and then the exercises. So those are both available. I have a blog. I now have a podcast called Treading the Waters of Life. So I'm offering coaching services as well. I'm going to be starting some groups and, doing some consulting work. And, like you said, I did just return from a a volunteer trip to Honduras, which is my second trip, working with an organization that is an independent living center over there, helping them with setting up their programs for people who are visually impaired. Also, they even just got a new facility, so helping with some ideas on how to ensure that that's accessible to people. So, I am really just trying to make an impact, but also take good care of myself. See what happens next.
Well, I was wondering if we were going to be playing twin telepathy. We hadn't prepped our guest for that, but if you're up for our game, I don't know if you've heard this game at the end of our episode, Sylvia, but basically I'll say a word and then count to 3, and then we'll all say the word that comes to mind.
Fun.
Okay, I'll start then. This is Jenelle. So the word is self. 1, 2, 3. Reflection. Oh. Okay, I'll think of the second word. How about action? 1, 2, 3. Plan. Oriented.
I was going to say oriented too.
You keep matching with one of us. Okay, can you think of a word, Sylvia? Do you have any?
Okay, let me think. Water. 1, 2, 3.
Gate.
Wave.
Water boat. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us. We are recording this on Martin Luther King Day, one of the great leaders. And in line with all of the many quotes that you shared in your book, I'm going to end with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that says, "If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward." Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Double Vision Podcast. The stories and perspectives shared here reflect our own lived experiences with blindness and disability and do not represent all blind or disabled people. This podcast is for conversation and reflection only and is not intended as therapy or a replacement for professional mental health care. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review wherever you listen. You can also leave us a voice message at 949-414-8336 or email mail@doublevisionblog.com with any suggestions for future episodes or comments. Special thanks to our production team, TLS Productions and Benjamin J. Thomas.